Welcome back to World Affairs in Context, everyone. Thank you for joining me. In a very important development that is without a doubt being closely watched by global markets, China has approved a limited number of rare earth exports following the phone conversation between US President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. This move is seen as a gesture of goodwill ahead of critical trade negotiations with the United States. Shortly after the phone conversation, Trump made a very telling remark. It was quite cryptic, but he said there should no longer be any questions respecting the complexity of rare earth products. It was a cryptic message, no doubt, but it was quite revealing. He hinted at the technical and geopolitical intricacies behind rare earth minerals and the US-China relations. And now, just a day before American and Chinese delegations are scheduled to meet in London for a new round of trade talks, China's approval of select exports is being interpreted as a very subtle but quite important signal that China is willing to compromise and it's willing to work with the United States. It is a very important signal. This decision marks a subtle yet quite significant shift in a month-long standoff over the supply of rare earth elements, those 17 critical minerals that are used in everything from EVs and wind turbines to smartphones and advanced military systems. It's used in everything. And it goes without saying that this isn't just about rocks being pulled from the ground. It's about geopolitics, it's about strategic leverage, and the escalating economic rivalry between the world's two largest economies, the United States and China. So what exactly happened? First, we'll cover the rare earth minerals and then we'll discuss the trade talks. On June the 7th, Beijing announced that it had granted approval for some applications to export rare earth minerals. It did not specify the destinations of these exports, it did not specify which sectors they would support, but it did acknowledge that there is a growing global demand for them, especially in robotics, in EVs, and high-tech manufacturing. In my opinion, the move clearly shows who has leverage and who has the cards, using Donald Trump's terminology. According to a report by Reuters, China has issued temporary export licenses to suppliers tied to the top 3 US automakers. That is, of course, a big deal. Companies like General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis rely on rare earth minerals for EV drivetrains, for infotainment systems, and advanced safety sensors. A bottleneck in supply could actually ripple through their entire supply chains, and it would slow production and raise costs. So China effectively said, okay, we will help you out, and we're doing this in good faith, hoping that our trade negotiations in London will actually be productive. Additionally, Beijing has also promised to accelerate export approvals for qualified rare earth shipments to Europe. So this is not just the United States, but Europe is also benefiting from this. And this is another signal that it's going to the trade talks in London in good faith and with hopes that both sides can move forward in a positive manner without escalating tensions even more. That, of course, remains to be seen. I think there is a lot at stake. So, what is at stake in those negotiations? Quite a lot. US officials have been increasingly vocal in their frustration and their negative views on China over the past couple of weeks. I've reported on this multiple times. The US officials multiple times accused China of backtracking on commitments that were made just last month in Geneva. Kevin Hassett, President Trump's top economic advisor, said during a CBS interview that while shipments have increased, they're still below the levels that both sides had agreed to. Again, there is really no way to verify these statements, so they should not be taken as 100% accurate, but that is effectively what he said. He also added, we want the rare earths, the magnets that are crucial for cell phones and everything else, to flow follow just as they did before the beginning of April, Hassett said. We don't want any technical details slowing that down. So effectively he's saying we're going to wage a trade war against you, China, but don't stop shipping us those rare earth minerals that we really, really want and need. That's effectively what he's saying. I think this is a very hypocritical way to address this. Now, China in turn said that the United States is seeking to destabilize relations further. So judging how poorly the past couple of weeks went for the US-China trade talks, I would think that it is fair to be very skeptical and very cautious going forward. China clearly shows that it's not going to dance to anyone's tune, while the United States is very much set in its ways and it's very unwilling to compromise, as you can see from the statement that I just quoted. I will remind you that China controls over 70% of the global supply of rare earth and even more of the refining and processing capabilities. China has truly unparalleled processing facilities, and this is precisely why, or rather one of the many reasons why, China will have an upper hand in this area and it will have the leverage. And of course, the United States knows this. This gives Beijing a very powerful lever in trade talks, especially when it comes to industries critical to the future economy. Cutting-edge electronics, advanced batteries, green energy infrastructure, defense technologies, all of these things rely heavily on rare earth minerals. And the United States, which of course is very rich in potential reserves, currently lacks the processing infrastructure to compete with China in the short term. And if you think that the United States can easily replace China in this regard, I would advise you to just look at New York subways to get a sense of the state of our American infrastructure. It's not a pretty picture. So this dynamic that I just described has turned rare earth into a new key aspect in US-China relations, joining a growing list of issues including semiconductors, tariffs, AI, and of course military tensions in the South China Sea, and so many more issues that cannot be resolved unless, arguably, the United States approaches them from a realistic perspective without hubris. For its part, China is walking a very careful line too. On one hand, it wants to demonstrate cooperation, it wants to show that it's willing to engage diplomatically, which it does every single time, especially if it hopes to reduce some of the tariffs and technology restrictions that have been imposed by Washington. Then on the other side of that spectrum, China defends its own interests, as it should, and just like the United States. So, by approving some exports, enough to show good faith and enough to show goodwill, but not enough to surrender its strategic edge, Beijing is effectively betting on a very meticulously calculated form of diplomacy. The coming days will reveal whether the bet actually pays off. Delegations from both sides are meeting in London on June the 9th, and their goal is to have an agreement that restores the steady flow of rare earth while also addressing broader trade imbalances. And this is something that President Trump won't compromise on, as it appears. If they succeed, it could ease one of the key pressure points in the US-China relationship and bring much-needed clarity to the global tech and auto industries. But if talks are unsuccessful, the supply of these critical minerals could once again be caught in the crossfire, and with it, of course, the pace of innovation across several strategic sectors that the United States heavily relies on. So the stakes could not be higher, as you can see, I'm sure. As always, we'll be watching closely. Thank you very much for joining me today. Remember to show your support. It truly goes a long way. Like, subscribe, and share. And subscribe on Substack and Patreon. You will find those links in the video description below. I would love to see you there too. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Bye for now.